Hello everyone. This video is to mostly cover and a brief overview of the Partee Racing carbon fiber plenum and velocity stacks to be installed on the S62. I'm also going to cover just a few basic things that I'm doing at the same time, namely replacing the fuel injectors that are very expensive from BMW with a 5.0 Motorsports fuel injector that very closely matches the dimensions of the stock injector. They do have more flow capability, so you do need to retune the DME or revise the parameters at bare minimum, which is fine and something that'll be done when this engine is dyno tuned. But just a forewarning on that. But it is I would call it a slight upgrade to the stock injector, but only if you really can utilize that extra headspace that they offer. But I guess also if you really just want a new fuel injector without spending the money on the ridiculous cost of the OE Bosch fuel injector, which you can only get from BMW that I've seen, that's a good alternative. So anyways, you can see I already removed the stock plenum sitting over there, and I also, if you sharp eyes will have noticed that all the throttle bodies are missing the studs. I did pull those out already, just use the basic double nut method. Had to apply a little bit of light heat to 3 or 4 of them. They were kind of stuck in there, a little corrosion or a little too much Loctite, factory Loctite. But got them all out with no real issue. So that part's done. Those do need to come out for the plenum installation, as the new setup does not use the stock studs, but you are supplied with these stainless steel bolts instead, along with gaskets to get the plenum and stacks installed. So really looking forward to getting this all in, and hopefully in the very near future get this thing dyno tuned. Not really looking for ultimate power, it's just more of a better durability, better heat transfer with the carbon fiber, a little more volume available, but the stacks are going to make the biggest difference power wise, but also just getting it tuned so that it drives smoothly on track. And I don't know, it's kind of like a ultimate OEM plus setup in my mind, at least for the type of use that I'm planning on. If this was a street only car, I certainly wouldn't go to these lengths. It's definitely a luxury that I'm thankful to be able to have. So anyways, I guess let's get further into it. First and foremost, these parts are absolutely gorgeous. If you can see not your reflection, but the reflection in the top of this thing. Just really nice finish on the parts. You can tell that they take their time and put their care into it, as if it was going to be going on their own car. The stacks are all labeled for which cylinder they belong to on the inside here. They're all numbered, which is a nice touch. They are certainly tuned for each cylinder, which is part of the reason why they are magical, and so far seem to have been netting some pretty serious gains for making what some would say is a pretty minor change, but that's the science of it. It's pretty neat. So here we have the lid, upper and lower lid, very similar design to stock, except you'll notice there are no middle stanchions. Those are no longer required. with the carbon fiber setup. But a lot of this should look familiar. I have to transfer over the cyclones and get the fittings on the bottom, and that's pretty much it, and we'll be able to get it installed. So first, before we can do that though, we need to swap out these injectors. Sharp eyes will also notice that my harness here does not look factory. All that big plastic housing type stuff is gone. It's all cut out, and kind of custom taped up. Partly for space constraints, partly because sharp eyes will also notice that we're using EV1 connectors instead of the factory setup that I don't quite like. It's just kind of finicky, and these days the plastic's getting old. The plastic around the retaining clips can break, and then you may not get a great seat on your fuel injector, and you can have some issues, minor issues, but the only way to fix it is to take the 8,000 nuts and bolts off of the plenum to get back down in here. And that's a pain that I've suffered through long enough dealing with throttle actuator issues on this build. So looking forward to moving past all that stuff here moving forward. But anyways, just 4 bolts holding in the rail, and disconnecting the harness, and I may have to cut a zip tie or two, and injector swap part is pretty self-explanatory. If you're able to get this far into the engine, you're certainly capable of changing your injectors without too much help. So we're gonna go ahead and do that next. Okay, now we have the lower plenum in place. You'll notice this gasket here looks familiar. That's because it's the stock plenum cover gasket. You'll need to transfer that over from your original plenum or buy a new one. This one is only a few months old, so we're going to reuse it. Also have the oil separators in place and all these hoses connected. You do need to transfer over this oil drain back fitting. Peter does provide a new banjo bolt and copper crush washers. I didn't transfer this one because I actually had a spare nozzle laying in the basement, so I just used that one. With the separators, for a little added measure of security for sealing, but to keep them from moving, I did add a little RTV. I don't like to do that kind of stuff, but I just felt that it's a little added security here, considering the mount bosses are not included in the carbon fiber plenum. I recall Peter saying they felt that they weren't necessary, and I would agree. I mean, this is definitely very secure now that all the hoses are attached and tightened down. But like I said, just kind of added precaution. These bushings are new, or fairly new as well, if I remember correctly. And they fit snug, they fit the right way. It's just, I guess, preference here. But anyways, all this stuff is attached, everything is installed the way you would normally install your lower plenum. Until you get to the inside here, obviously some major differences. There's no 4 pylons are missing because those aren't necessary anymore. And the studs are gone. So, we'll be working on getting everything lined up. There's just a little pressure on this from having the hoses on. So the next step though is I'm planning on using a little bit of this high tack. They call it a gasket sealant, but just a little bit of some sticky stuff to hold the paper gaskets in place on the throttle body tops. And then we'll go through and get the velocity stacks in. And remember, these are numbered for the cylinder they belong on, so make sure you take note of that when you get to this point. Okay, now we have the velocity stacks installed. The only tips here would be try to put one in. I started in the back and worked my way forward, but get one lined up and shoved in there. Start 2 of the bolts, do not tighten them. Just kind of get them partway started, and then go through and just put each one of these in place and get them in there, just so that everything's lined up, and just loosely start all of the bolts, just to ensure everything's lined up. There's not extra stress where it shouldn't be. You don't want to do that, and just make sure you're not wasting any time this way by having something misaligned and you got to go back and loosen it, etc. So just get them all placed in there and just start the threads on the bolts a little bit. And then once you get all that in, personal preference and kind of just best practices is, start on the middle 2. I cinched them up a decent amount. Then I did these middle 2, and then I came back and tightened them a little more, and moved around to the outside ones, and then did a third and final, make sure everything is tight, or get everything final tight. You'll want to use probably a quarter drive. It's 4mm head here, on an extension, or have one that's one of those long keys with the socket on the end would work as well. And doing it that way, you do have access to all of the bolt heads. None of them are blocked. This one on both sides is a little tight, but again, that's the reason for using a quarter drive with an extension, or one of those long extended 4mm Allen keys. And then you can reach in there, no problem, get everything cinched up, and that's really it. Obviously, put the cover on. Peter supplies some nice bolts for that. There's some anti-seize on them already, so that's why they're some of them look colored. But I'll wipe these back down and we'll get the cover on. And just like that, it's done. The only additional comment I have is, once you torque all these, go around, you're going to be pushing that gasket down in and really seating it into the channel on the lower half. I just recommend after 1 or 2 heat soaks to go through and recheck the tightness on all those bolts. You don't want to over torque anything on here, but things also can loosen up from the heat cycles and that rubber moving a little bit, or kind of fully seating. So just double check that stuff after you're done, and rinse and repeat on your intakes and anything else that you may have removed for the work. But that's it. Now it's off to enjoy, if this is the only thing you're doing. But for me, we installed new injectors, and generally just have a bunch of changes to the car. So the next step for me is the dyno, for a custom dyno tune. Planning to have that done by Peter Partee's tuner, remote tune, on a local dyno here. So more to follow in the future, hopefully near future. I'll do something on the dyno visit, and certainly will post up the results. I have no expectations, no preconceived notion on what is possible or capable. Like I had mentioned before, really just looking to smooth out the power everywhere. Obviously take advantage of the parts that were installed, but I'm not just looking for a maximum horsepower number. I'm looking to have it be a really smooth running engine through the power band, kind of as best as possible for what we have. So that's it. Your mileage may vary.